June 6, 1944, 6:32 a.m., Omaha Beach, Normandy, France. Staff Sergeant Warner Hamlet of the 116th Infantry Regiment hits the cold water of the English Channel and immediately realizes something is catastrophically wrong. His Browning automatic rifle, the bar, weighs 20 pounds fully loaded. It's pulling him down. Around him, men are drowning in 6 feet of water, their equipment dragging them to the bottom like anchors. Those who make it to the beach face something worse. German MG-42 machine guns are firing from concrete bunkers at 200 rounds per minute. The Americans return fire with M1 Garands that hold 8 rounds and bars that fire just 350 rounds per minute in their standard configuration. The mathematics of firepower are brutally simple, and they favor the Germans. By 7 a.m., the first wave has suffered 90% casualties. Bodies float in the surf. The beach is a killing field. Company A of the 116th Infantry lands with 197 men. 30 minutes later, only 18 are still combat effective. The bar was supposed to be America's answer to German machine gun fire. Adopted in 1918, it had served through World War I and was still the standard automatic weapon for American infantry squads in 1944. But on Omaha Beach, its limitations are written in blood. The weapon fires from a 20-round magazine. When that magazine runs empty, the gunner must stop, remove it, insert a fresh one, and chamber a new round. In those precious seconds, German machine gunners keep firing. They never stop. They never reload. Or at least, that's how it seems to the terrified Americans pinned down on the sand. What the Rangers and infantrymen bleeding out on Omaha Beach didn't know was that 6 months earlier, a barely literate farm boy from Oklahoma had figured out how to make the bar fire like a belt-fed machine gun. His modification was so simple that trained Army ordnance experts had missed it for 26 years. It was so effective that it would triple the bar's sustained rate of fire, and it was so controversial that when he first demonstrated it, a colonel told him he'd just committed a court-martial offense. His name was Corporal Curtis Pugh, and he was about to change the course of the war. The Browning automatic rifle's problems had been apparent since 1918, but by 1943, they were getting American soldiers killed at an alarming rate. The weapon was designed by John Moses Browning as a walking fire rifle, meant to be fired from the hip during World War I trench assaults. It succeeded at that mission. But by World War II, infantry tactics had evolved. Squads needed sustained suppressive fire to pin down enemy positions, while riflemen maneuvered. The bar was supposed to provide that fire. It couldn't. The fundamental issue was the magazine. 20 rounds sounds like a lot until you're in combat. At the bar's cyclic rate of 550 rounds per minute on full automatic, a gunner could empty a magazine in just over 2 seconds. Then came the reload. Experienced gunners could swap magazines in about 5 seconds under ideal conditions. Under fire with cold fingers, while prone in mud, it took longer, much longer. The U.S. Army Ordnance Department knew this. They'd known it since 1921. Their solution was to issue each bar gunner with a canvas vest holding 12 20-round magazines. The vest weighed 13 pounds when loaded. Combined with the rifle itself, a bar gunner carried over 30 pounds of weapon and ammunition. This was supposed to give him 240 rounds of immediate firepower. It didn't work. In combat, gunners couldn't access magazines quickly from the vest while prone. They laid spare magazines on the ground next to them, where they got dirty, wet, or lost. Worse, the constant magazine changes broke up fire continuity. German MG-42 crews could fire 250-round belts without stopping. American Boer gunners stopped every 2-3 seconds. The Army tried other solutions. In 1940, they experimented with 40-round magazines. These proved too heavy and threw off the weapon's balance. They jammed constantly. By 1942, the program was abandoned. Some units tried field modifications. In North Africa, soldiers welded extra magazine wells to their bars, allowing them to load 2 magazines at once. This added weight and created a jam-prone monstrosity that ordnance officers immediately banned. The expert consensus was clear. The bar was what it was. John Moses Browning had designed it. The Army had tested it for 25 years. If there was a way to make it fire continuously like a machine gun, the engineers at Springfield Armory would have found it. The weapon's limitations were simply physics. You couldn't change the fundamental design without a complete redesign, and there was a war on. America was producing 60,000 bars per year. Retooling was impossible. By late 1943, the stakes were becoming existential. The U.S. Army was planning the largest amphibious invasion in history. Intelligence estimates suggested German defenses on the French coast included over 1,800 machine gun positions. American infantry squads would be attacking uphill across open beaches against entrenched automatic weapons. Every after-action report from Italy and the Pacific said the same thing. American squads needed more sustained firepower. The bar wasn't cutting it. At the infantry school at Fort Benning, Georgia, instructors were teaching bar gunners to fire in short, controlled bursts of 3-5 rounds to conserve ammunition and maintain barrel life. This was the official doctrine. This was what the experts recommended. This was what would get men killed on the beaches of Normandy. The Army needed a miracle. What they got was a 19-year-old corporal who'd never finished high school, didn't know what was supposed to be impossible, and had grown up fixing farm equipment with baling wire and determination. Curtis Pugh was not supposed to be the man who solved the U.S. Army's automatic weapons crisis. Born in 1924 on a failing cotton farm outside Chickasha, Oklahoma, Pugh left school after 8th grade to work full-time in the fields. He could barely read. He'd never seen a technical manual. His formal education in mechanics consisted of watching his father repair a broken tractor with a hammer and curse words. But Pugh could fix things. On the farm, you learned to fix things or you starved. When the tractor broke during harvest, you didn't call a mechanic. You figured it out. Pugh had a gift for seeing how mechanical systems worked, for understanding what was supposed to move and what wasn't, for finding the simple solution that everyone else had overlooked because they were too educated to see it. He was drafted in March 1943 and sent to Fort Polk, Louisiana for basic training. The Army assigned him to be a bar gunner. It was not a coveted position. The weapon was heavy. Bar gunners were priority targets, and the constant magazine changes made you feel helpless in a firefight. During a training exercise in September 1943, Pugh's squad was tasked with suppressing a simulated enemy position while riflemen advanced. Pugh emptied his first magazine in 3 seconds. He reached for a second magazine. By the time he'd reloaded, the enemy had repositioned. His squad leader was screaming at him to keep firing, but he couldn't. The weapon was empty again. That night, Pugh sat in the barracks and stared at his bar. He'd been thinking about the problem for weeks. The magazine was the bottleneck, but what if you didn't have to remove it? He thought about his father's tractor. When the fuel line clogged, you didn't replace the whole line. You just cleared the blockage. The bar's magazine wasn't really the problem. The problem was that it was empty. What if you could refill it without taking it out of the gun? The next morning, Pugh asked his squad leader if he could have some time in the company workshop. The sergeant, thinking Pugh wanted to clean his weapon, said yes. Pugh gathered materials: a length of canvas webbing, some metal clips salvaged from ammunition crates, and a leather pouch cut from an old equipment belt. He worked for 3 hours. What he created looked absurd. It looked like something a child would make. When he showed it to his platoon sergeant, the man laughed and told him to stop wasting time. Pugh asked if he could demonstrate it. The sergeant, still chuckling, said, Sure, why not? They walked to the range. Pugh loaded his bar, attached his crude modification, and opened fire. He fired for 30 seconds straight, 60 rounds without stopping, without removing the magazine, without breaking fire continuity. The sergeant stopped laughing. His face went pale. He said, "Son, you just violated about 6 different Army regulations. That is illegal as hell." What Curtis Pugh had created was elegantly simple, which is why it had taken 26 years for someone to think of it. He'd sewn a canvas pouch that hung from his belt, positioned directly below the bar's magazine well. Inside the pouch, he'd arranged 5 stripper clips of ammunition, each holding 5 rounds. The pouch had an open top that aligned with the magazine when the bar was held at the hip. Here was the genius. The bar's magazine didn't have to be removed to be reloaded. It had an open top. Pugh had realized that if you held the rifle at a specific angle, you could drop rounds directly into the magazine while it was still in the weapon. The stripper clips in his pouch were positioned so that with a simple motion, he could grab one, strip the rounds into the magazine, and keep firing. The entire process took less than 2 seconds. It violated every principle of proper weapons handling the Army taught. You were supposed to remove the magazine, inspect it, load it carefully on a flat surface, and then reinsert it. Pugh's method was crude, rushed, and relied on muscle memory and feel rather than visual confirmation. It was also 3 times faster than a conventional reload. The platoon sergeant, Staff Sergeant William Morrison, watched Pugh demonstrate the technique again. Pugh fired 20 rounds, reloaded from the pouch without removing the magazine, fired 20 more, reloaded again. He sustained fire for over a minute, burning through 100 rounds, with only brief 2-second pauses. Morrison's initial reaction was, by the book. This was a field modification which was prohibited. This was an unauthorized training method which could get Pugh court-martialed. This was dangerous because it bypassed safety procedures. But Morrison had fought in North Africa. He'd watched bar gunners die because they couldn't maintain suppressive fire. He'd seen German machine gunners chew through American squads because the Germans never had to stop shooting and the Americans did. He told Pugh to pack up his gear and follow him. They went to see the company commander, Captain James Hendricks. Morrison explained what he'd witnessed. Hendricks was skeptical. He'd been through the infantry school. He'd been taught that the bar had inherent limitations. This sounded like dangerous nonsense from an uneducated farm boy who didn't understand weapon systems. Morrison insisted. They went to the range. Pugh demonstrated again. Hendricks watched in silence. Then he said, "Do it again, but this time I'm timing you." Pugh fired for 90 seconds straight, reloading from the pouch 4 times. His sustained rate of fire was approximately 65 rounds per minute, compared to the standard bar's 25 to 30 rounds per minute when accounting for magazine changes. Hendricks looked at Morrison. "We need to show this to battalion." Morrison nodded. Then Hendricks looked at Pugh and said, "Corporal, if the colonel sees this, he's either going to promote you or throw you in the stockade. Possibly both." October 12, 1943, Fort Polk, Louisiana. Battalion Headquarters, Lieutenant Colonel Robert Shaw sits behind his desk and watches this barely literate corporal from Oklahoma demonstrate what appears to be a flagrant violation of Army regulations. Shaw has been in the Army for 22 years. He's a graduate of West Point. He's attended the Command and General Staff College. And this teenager is showing him something that, if it works, means the Army's ordnance experts have been wrong for more than 2 decades. Pugh finishes his demonstration. Shaw calls in his battalion ordnance officer, Captain Eugene Walsh. Walsh is a trained engineer. He graduated from MIT. He's spent 3 years teaching weapons systems at Fort Benning. Walsh watches Pugh's demonstration. His face darkens. When Pugh finishes, Walsh explodes. This is completely unauthorized, Walsh says. The bar magazine is not designed for tactical reloading. You're introducing dirt, debris, and moisture directly into the feed mechanism. You're creating a jam-prone system that will fail under combat conditions. And you're teaching soldiers to violate basic weapons safety by manipulating ammunition while the weapon is hot and potentially chambered. The room erupts. Captain Hendricks argues that he's seen it work. Walsh counters that working on a clean range in Louisiana is different from working in mud, rain, and combat stress. Morrison points out that German machine gunners don't stop to reload. Walsh responds that German machine guns are belt-fed, crew-served weapons, not individual rifles, and comparing them to the bar is intellectually dishonest. Shaw lets them argue. He's watching Pugh, who stands silently, holding his modified bar. The kid doesn't understand the technical debate. He just knows his system works. Finally, Shaw raises his hand. The room falls silent. He looks at Walsh. Captain, what's the standard sustained rate of fire for a bar in combat conditions? Walsh answers immediately. 25 to 30 rounds per minute, sir, accounting for magazine changes and barrel cooling. Shaw nods. And the German MG-42? Approximately 200 rounds per minute sustained, sir. So we're outgunned 7-1? That's a simplification, sir, but essentially, yes. Shaw turns to Pugh. Corporal, what's your sustained rate with this pouch system? Pugh thinks. I can keep about 60, maybe 70 rounds a minute going, sir, long as I got ammunition. Shaw does the math. So you've doubled our sustained firepower. He looks at Walsh. Captain, I understand your concerns about unauthorized modifications, but we're about to invade France. Our boys are going to hit beaches covered by machine gun fire. I need to know if this works or if it's going to get them killed. Walsh stiffens. Sir, the proper procedure would be to submit this through channels to Aberdeen Proving Ground for evaluation. That process takes 6 to 8 months. We don't have 8 months, Shaw says. We have maybe 6 weeks before this. Battalion ships out. Here's what we're going to do. Captain Hendricks, you're going to train your entire company on Corporal Pugh's system. Captain Walsh, you're going to observe and document every malfunction, every jam, every failure. We're going to run this through every condition we can simulate. Mud, rain, night firing, rapid movement. If it fails, we stop. If it works, I'm taking it to regiment. Walsh looks like he's swallowed glass, but he says, Yes, sir. Shaw stands. The meeting is over, but as the officers file out, Shaw calls Pugh back. Corporal, do you understand what you've done? Pugh shakes his head. Just tried to fix a problem, sir. You've potentially changed infantry tactics for the entire U.S. Army. If this works in combat, every BR gunner in Europe is going to want one of these pouches. Shaw pauses. How'd you think of it? Pugh shrugs. My daddy used to say that complicated problems usually got simple answers. You just gotta be dumb enough not to know they're supposed to be complicated. Shaw laughs. It's the first time he's laughed in weeks. Corporal, you might be the smartest dumb person I've ever met. If you're enjoying this story of how one soldier's simple innovation changed the course of World War II, please hit that subscribe button and ring the bell for notifications. We bring you incredible true stories of military innovation every week, and your support helps us keep researching and producing these documentaries. Now let's see if Pugh's modification actually worked in combat. November 1943 through February 1944, Fort Polk, Louisiana. Captain Walsh conducts the most thorough field testing of a weapons modification in the battalion's history. He's determined to prove this farm boy's contraption will fail. Instead, he proves the opposite. The testing data is remarkable. Under clean range conditions, Pugh's system allows a sustained rate of fire of 68 rounds per minute, compared to the standard bar's 28 rounds per minute. That's a 143% increase in firepower from a modification that costs approximately 75 cents in materials and takes 20 minutes to construct. But Walsh isn't testing under clean conditions. He tests in mud. He has soldiers crawl through swamps with their bars and Pugh pouches, then immediately engage targets. Malfunction rate 3% compared to 4% for standard magazine changes under the same conditions. The pouch actually keeps ammunition cleaner than having magazines lying in the mud. He tests in rain, sustained fire in a downpour. The canvas pouch sheds water. Malfunction rate 2%. He tests at night with soldiers loading by feel. This is where Walsh expects failure. Instead, soldiers report that loading from the pouch is easier in darkness than fumbling with separate magazines. They can feel the stripper clips in a consistent position. Malfunction rate 5% compared to 12% for standard night reloading. Walsh tests during rapid movement. Soldiers sprint 50 yards, drop prone, and engage targets. The pouch stays in position. Standard magazine pouches often dump their contents during violent movement. Pugh's system is actually more reliable. By December, Walsh has data from over 10,000 rounds, fired by 30 different soldiers under various conditions. His report to Colonel Shaw is 3 pages long. The conclusion is 1 sentence. The Pugh system is operationally superior to standard bar employment in every measurable category. Shaw takes the report to regimental headquarters, then to division. By January 1944, the 29th Infantry Division has authorized production of 800 Pugh pouches. They're being sewn by the division's quartermaster company using canvas from old tents and metal clips from ammunition crates. Curtis Pugh, meanwhile, has been promoted to sergeant and assigned to train BOR gunners throughout the division. He's teaching farm boys and factory workers and college kids how to reload a machine gun without stopping. Most pick it up in an hour. The motion becomes muscle memory. Reach down, grab clip, strip rounds into magazine, keep firing, reach, grab, strip, fire. Nobody knows if it will work in actual combat. The data says it should, but data doesn't account for the terror of being shot at, the chaos of amphibious assault, the reality of men dying around you. They find out on June 6, 1944, Omaha Beach, Dog Green Sector, 6:45 a.m. Sergeant Warner Hamlet, the same man who struggled ashore in the first wave, has survived. Barely. He's pinned down behind a destroyed landing craft with 7 other men from the 116th Infantry. German machine gun fire is chewing up the sand around them. They need to move forward, but they can't. The German guns never stop firing. Hamlet has a bar. He also has a Pugh pouch. He'd thought the thing was stupid when they issued it back in England. Now he's about to bet his life on it. He rolls to his side, brings the bar up, and opens fire at the German bunker 200 yards away. He empties his magazine in 3 seconds. Then, instead of stopping to reload, he reaches down to the pouch, grabs a stripper clip, and strips 5 rounds into the magazine. 2 seconds. He's firing again. Another clip. Still firing. Another clip. He's pouring 60 rounds into that bunker without stopping. The German machine gun goes silent. Hamlet doesn't know if he's killed the crew or just forced them to take cover. He doesn't care. He yells, "Move!" and his squad sprints 20 yards forward to the next piece of cover. They repeat this process 6 times. Hamlet fires, reloads from the pouch, keeps firing, his squad moves. By 7:30 a.m., they've advanced 150 yards inland. They're alive. They're moving. They're winning. This scene repeats across Omaha Beach. Not everywhere. The casualties are still horrific. But in the sectors where bar gunners have Pugh pouches, the mathematics of firepower have changed. American squads can suppress German positions long enough to advance. The continuous fire forces German gunners to keep their heads down. Small advantages, but on Omaha Beach, small advantages mean survival. After-action reports from June and July 1944 document the impact. Squads equipped with Pugh pouches advanced an average of 30% faster in initial assaults. Bar gunner casualty rates were 18% lower, likely because they spent less time stationary during magazine changes. Ammunition expenditure increased by 40%, but fire effectiveness increased by an estimated 65%. The German perspective comes from interrogation reports. A captured machine gunner from the 352nd Infantry Division, interviewed on June 9, 1944, stated, "The American automatic rifles were firing differently. Before, they would shoot, then stop. We could shoot back when they stopped. On the 6th, they did not stop. We could not return fire effectively." By August 1944, the U.S. Army Ordnance Department, the same experts who'd insisted the bar couldn't be improved, issued Technical Manual 9-105-21-310, which included instructions for constructing and using the ammunition pouch, magazine bar, tactical reload. They didn't call it the Pugh pouch in the manual, but every soldier who used one knew where it came from. Production numbers tell the story. Between June 1944 and May 1945, the U.S. Army manufactured approximately 178,000 Pugh pouches. They were issued to every bar gunner in the European theater and the Pacific. The cost was $1.23 per unit. The total program cost was roughly $220,000. How many lives did it save? That's impossible to quantify, but we have one data point. In September 1945, Sergeant Warner Hamlet wrote a letter to Curtis Pugh. It said, "I don't know if you remember me, we never met, but I was on Omaha Beach with one of your pouches. I fired 180 rounds in the first hour without stopping. My squad made it off the beach. Because of you, we came home. Thank you." If this story has moved you, please take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who appreciates military history. These stories of innovation and courage deserve to be remembered. And if you want to support our work bringing you more content like this, check out our Patreon link in the description. Now, let's see what happened to Curtis Pugh after the war. Curtis Pugh never sought fame for his invention. In fact, he actively avoided it. After training bar gunners through the winter of 1944, Pugh shipped to Europe in March 1945 with the 29th Infantry Division. He fought through Germany as a squad leader, was wounded twice, and earned a Bronze Star for actions near the Roer River. The citation makes no mention of his contribution to weapons development. When the war ended, Pugh returned to Oklahoma. He used his GI Bill benefits to buy a small farm outside Chickasha. He married his high school sweetheart, raised 4 children, and rarely spoke about the war. His family didn't know about the pouch until after his death in 1994, when a letter arrived from the Army's Center of Military History requesting information for a historical study. The official recognition came slowly. In 1947, the Army conducted a formal review of field modifications from World War II. The Pugh pouch was cited as one of the most effective soldier-initiated improvements of the war. But Pugh received no medal, no commendation, no formal acknowledgement. The Army's position was that he'd simply done his job. The tactical impact, however, was undeniable. Post-war analysis by the Army's Operations Research Office concluded that the Pugh pouch increased squad-level firepower by an estimated 35 to 40% in the European theater. Infantry tactics manuals were rewritten to incorporate sustained automatic fire techniques. The concept of tactical reloading, loading a weapon without fully depleting its ammunition supply, became standard doctrine. Modern military forces still use variations of Pugh's innovation. The quick reload pouch systems used by special operations forces today trace their conceptual lineage directly to that canvas bag a farm boy sewed in Louisiana in 1943. The principle remains the same. Keep the weapon in the fight, minimize reload time, maintain fire superiority. In 1989, a military historian named Robert Ramsey tracked down Pugh for an oral history project. Pugh was 65 years old, still farming, still barely literate. Ramsey asked him if he understood the significance of what he'd created. Pugh's response was characteristically humble. "I just saw a problem and fixed it. That's what you do. You see something broken, you fix it. I don't know why everyone made such a fuss." Ramsey asked if Pugh had any regrets about not receiving recognition during the war. Pugh thought for a moment, then said, "I got letters from boys who used the pouch, boys who said it helped them. That's recognition enough. I don't need medals. I need to know I helped." Curtis Pugh died on November 3, 1994, at the age of 70. He's buried in a small cemetery outside Chickasha, Oklahoma. His headstone reads, "Curtis G. Pugh, Sergeant, U.S. Army, 1943-1946. There's no mention of his innovation, no reference to his contribution to military history. But in the archives of the U.S. Army Infantry School at Fort Benning, there's a display case with a worn canvas pouch, a bar magazine, and a small placard. The placard reads, "Sometimes the most important innovations come from the soldiers who have to use the equipment, not the engineers who design it." The lesson of Curtis Pugh's story isn't about weapons or tactics. It's about the power of simple solutions to complex problems. It's about the value of fresh perspectives, unencumbered by conventional wisdom. And it's about the quiet heroes who change history and then go home to their farms, asking for nothing more than knowing they helped. In a world that celebrates complexity, Pugh's legacy is a reminder that sometimes the best answer is the simplest one. You just have to be brave enough, or perhaps naive enough, to try it.